As a busy mom, I'm always on the lookout for a shortcut that will not sacrifice quality or money in the kitchen. One of the best tools in my toolbox is my sheet pan. All of the food is done at the same time, plus the majority of the cleanup is accomplished while dinner's in the oven. Unless that is, the unexpected happens and your oven quits working once the sheet pans are full. Then it's time to improvise. Recently, I was making a round of pancakes for my family, and I forgot that I left the last set over on the griddle while I was helping somebody with math. Those obviously didn't turn out so great, but in that process, I really began thinking, why am I doing it this way? There has to be a better way. And at that moment, I remembered hearing one of my friends talk about making pancakes on her sheet pan. Today, we're starting off breakfast exactly in that way, and I have to tell you, this changed the way we will run our kitchen moving forward when it comes to breakfast. The recipe that I'm using today is a sourdough discard recipe, but if you want to use a boxed mix, you can absolutely do that and save a little bit extra time in your kitchen as well. I simply don't keep those on hand because we have all of the basic ingredients stocked for other recipes, so this makes my kitchen a little bit more versatile and cuts out the specialty items needing to be purchased. As you can see, today I am definitely not alone in the kitchen. I have plenty of helpers checking in, and I'll definitely have a few more checking in by the end of the day. If you're new here, my kitchen is rarely just me. I have 5 kids ranging in age from 10 to 2, and they all love being involved. While their assistance sometimes can cost me a few extra minutes, it's really great to have them in there because they're learning skills that'll help them throughout their lifetime. And in addition, they have a really great appetite because they're willing to work on anything or taste anything, I should say, that they have had their hands involved in making. The recipe that I'm basing my pancake off of comes from a blog called actsofsourdough.com. I'll make sure to link that down below, as well as any other recipes that I might reference along the way. The recipe itself calls for 1.5 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 cup of sugar, 1.5 cups of milk, 1 cup of sourdough discard, 4 tablespoons of melted butter, and 2 eggs. There's also a cinnamon sugar swirl topping, which I did not add, as well as a sugar maple glaze. I had considered putting those in, but we decided to go a different way and add the sausage into our pancake itself to make this one really, really easy meal that includes a high pop of protein with the sausage added in. Before we got started on the recipe, I went ahead and preheated the oven to 350 and melted 4 tablespoons of butter. I poured those melted tablespoons of butter right into my recipe, and it really made the pancakes taste very, very delicious, as you can imagine. The kids actually thought the brown sugar glaze was in there simply because they had read the recipe before I started, and they were surprised to learn later in the day that that wasn't in there because they thought the flavoring was really, really good. Now, part of that, of course, is that the sausage that I added was a breakfast sausage, so it had a lot of those similar flavors already in there. And then once you add the maple syrup, you kind of get the idea. The flavoring is just delicious in this pancake. Now, as you can see here, 1 big sheet pan pancake going in. And the sausage I just sprinkled on top right before. I didn't actually blend it into the dough, and it turned out really nice. They actually joked that it looked like my mother-in-law's blonde brownie recipe and that the sausage looked like chocolate chips. So if you can pull that off and convince them that their sausage is a chocolate chip, I'll consider that a win. This recipe was so loved that they requested it just the next morning. I didn't get it back out again, but it will make a reappearance. They definitely enjoyed this one for sure. Since I was able to capitalize on the time when this was in the oven, after we finished breakfast, the kids all took their plates over to the sink and we jumped right into our math. Now, the first thing that we always get out of the way in the morning is our homeschool math lessons for both of the older boys, and then we have a little bit of time to go play outside, especially on these spring mornings. This was the perfect time in my day to head out to the garden and get those last few seeds sown before it was time to move back into the kitchen for lunch. Now, this next meal is one of my all-time favorite quick meals for the kiddos. They love it. My husband, not so much. But for us during the day when he's at work, a quick plate of nachos is so simple to put together. But I'm dressing this one up just a little bit using the canned pork that I made back in January. I do have a video on that, so I'll make sure to link it at the end. But having a shelf-stable meat like that is cooked and ready to go and can be used as a topping on a nacho or in a taco, any sort of pulled pork sandwich or something like that, just makes lunches so much faster. So here I'm draining off the extra broth and then also rinsing a can of black beans to put on the nachos so they have a little extra protein to go along with that meat. This is a barbecue pulled pork nacho, but not all of my crew is so happy about the extra toppings. So as you'll see in a minute, I'm able to customize the sheet pan to not only serve the taste of the majority of the family, but also to save a portion to the side for the kids that might not like one or two ingredients. Now, sometimes I'll make a meal and I'll just tell them to pick off whatever they don't like. But in this case, it's really easy with that sheet pan space just to customize and make that allowance and allow everyone to be satisfied with the meal. Depending on the toppings that you select, a plate of nachos can take 2 or 3 minutes to throw together. Today, of course, I'm adding a few extra things, so that added a touch of time. But starting off here just with a plate of nachos, and then for the barbecue side, of course, a barbecue sauce. You can use anything that you like or even leave it out. But we went with a barbecue sauce, some shredded cheese, and then the pulled pork, followed by the black beans. Sometimes I'll add some corn in here. That makes a really great crunch as well, but really toppings are up to you. If you have people that like jalapenos and like something a little spicier, that's also really great to add, especially when a barbecue or something a little more spicy is what's on the agenda. For us today, though, kind of keeping it simple, the right side here will actually end up with cheese, and then at the end, they're going to put some extra sour cream and salsa on top, so they have a few more toppings, but it really is just a very quick way to throw everything out. Now, at this time, you can see my little red lights on there in my oven. I was preheating my oven, or so I thought, to 350, but it never got off of 100, which is the base number that it reads when you turn it on. And at the time, I just wasn't thinking, and I typically put my nachos under the broiler anyway, so I clicked on the broiler, threw these in, and got them browned up. As you'll see in a minute, I actually got 1 or 2, maybe a little too brown, which I'm guilty of doing if I get tied up doing something else over at the sink or cleaning up my mess. With most sheet pan meals, you have quite a bit of time to do that. But with a nacho, it can go really fast depending on how high or low your rack is and how high you have the broiler turned up. It didn't really make a difference though. We just broke off the top edge of 1 or 2 chips. They got a little extra crispy. Everyone was super thrilled and enjoyed their meal. And again, a really quick one to clean up because all you have to do is scrape off what is left, if anything, on your sheet pan and you're ready to go on for the next meal. If that is, the oven's working, which we're about to find out with that next meal is just not the case. With lunch wrapped up and put away and the kids out enjoying the beautiful weather, I went ahead and turned my attention to our dinner plan, which is a garlic lemon sheet pan chicken. This meal, I have to tell you, was so fabulous that my kids have changed their mind from being nonstop insistent that our sheet pan chicken be only pesto to making sure that this has a real spot in the rotation. If you're interested in the full recipe, again, it'll be down below. It's from a website called carlsbadcravings.com, and it really, really is worth the time and one that you could even marinate a night or two before, put in the fridge, and just pull out and have ready to go. I used a tray of chicken thighs that I got from Sam's, and the tray had about 18 to 20 thighs on it. I did half, which I thought would be enough for my family, but if I went ahead and done it all, they would have been really happy to have some leftovers. So keep that in mind when you're making your portion sizes. This would be awesome added to a salad the next day or just as leftovers of any kind. The recipe itself calls for about 2 pounds of boneless, skinless chicken thighs, 1 pound of potatoes quartered and halved, and 3 cups of broccoli florets. Now, at my house, 1 pound of potatoes isn't going to go far, so we definitely did more than that. But again, customize it to what works well for your family. The marinade ingredients include a 1/3 cup of olive oil, 3 cloves of minced garlic, even though I used some powder garlic that I had dehydrated last year, 3 tablespoons of freshly squeezed lemon juice, 1 tablespoon of Dijon mustard, a teaspoon each of salt, pepper, dried basil, dried oregano, and onion powder, and a 1/2 teaspoon each of paprika, ground cumin, and dried thyme, and sugar, although I substituted honey instead. And again, in place of that basil, I went ahead and did a healthy serving of basil pesto. Once the marinade was wrapped up and the chicken was placed back in the refrigerator, I went ahead and took that time to go get nap time started. Now, at my house, if we skip nap time, we all pay. So the big kids are coming in to let me know exactly what time it is and that perhaps I should be getting her upstairs so we have a nice, enjoyable, peaceful evening. After a few hours, I headed back to the kitchen to go ahead and prep those potatoes for our meal. Now, like I mentioned before, my kids need a few more than 1 to 2 pounds of potatoes. So we went ahead and washed up quite a few extras to make sure that nobody went to bed hungry. I'm wondering if I'm alone here, but when I'm involved in projects like this that involve getting my hands wet, it's almost as if my toddler can sense it from a deep sleep. She awakes and cannot wait to get her hands wet and get back in the mix with whatever's going on in the kitchen. Are you the same way? Or is my baby just totally tuned into that kitchen faucet and can't sleep through it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. She's the first one that I've ever had that just wakes up the minute I get involved in a really large project. And I'm not sure if it's just because we're in tune or she has a sixth sense about what's going on in the kitchen. Once she got her chair pushed up to the perfect spot at the countertop, we went ahead and finished chopping up the potatoes, and she made sure to get them perfectly spread out for the meal. Now, once that was accomplished, we went ahead and got them seasoned up and ready to go into the oven, or so we thought. This is olive oil I'm just putting right on top, and then I'm simply seasoning them with salt and pepper. The recipe does say to reserve some of the marinade before you add the chicken and to season up the potatoes as well as the broccoli to go along with it. Now, I didn't want to do that because one thing that sometimes gets me about sheet pan meals is that every single item has a little bit of the same flavor, and so I wanted the potatoes to have their own. I also added some onions that were previously chopped out of the freezer, and so the flavoring itself needed to be a little bit different for us just so the entire meal didn't have the same flavor. Now, as you can see, she's pretty insistent that she manage the salt shaker, but since it's a grinder, it's a little bit more difficult, so we worked together to get that done. I did manage to do the majority of the pepper by myself, so it went a little bit faster, but she was super proud of being the one to season up the potatoes, and it's always fun to hear her laugh and giggle when she's helping me out in the kitchen. It was right about now that my kids realized the oven still said 100 instead of the temperature needed for the recipe. So all the laughter and games was over when we realized we now have raw chicken ready to go. We have the potatoes ready to go in. It's almost time to get ready for ball practice, and we can put that meal together. So at this point, I was on the phone discussing with my husband that something was going on at our house. We've had a few other things recently go wrong as well. Our air conditioner upstairs has stopped. Our garage door has an issue. Our dishwasher had an issue after this video was put together. And one other thing, something pretty major. Anyway, oh yeah, my washer and dryer. There'll be a video about that coming soon for those of you who follow along with that process. But we've had a lot go wrong in the last couple weeks around here. And needless to say, we've called a lot of repairmen in around here lately. We've had some really big storms come through our part of the country, and I think we must have got struck by lightning. My husband did hear a loud sound in the night and some popping, but we've just had things going down, and it is not working out. The kids were ready to grab everything and take it out to my mother-in-law's house so we could still have the same meals that we had planned. After all, we're recording a video on sheet pan meals. How can we turn it into an air fryer meal? Well, that's exactly what happened. This meal turned out great either way. I air fried it on 400 for about 10 minutes, checked the temperature, and the chicken turned out amazing. The potatoes headed to the top of the stove because the whole top of my stove is still working, as well as the broiler. So it looks like I made sure to use avocado oil so I could cook them really hot and high. Olive oil has a lower smoke point, so that worked out really well for us. In the meantime, my husband was calling back to check on a few more things. He was on his way home to get his meal, or so he thought, before the guys all headed off to baseball practice. We had also went and checked some of the breaker boxes and done all of that kind of stuff. So our time kind of got away from us. Now, that worked out for the girls who didn't have anything to do for the evening, but the boys, a little bit different. Luckily for them, the meal was done just in time. They grabbed some of those chicken thighs and ate them on their way out the door, but it turned out so good. The one thing I didn't get done, which I was going to add to the sheet pan, was the broccoli. So the meal itself was just potatoes and chicken. Typically, that's not how it would be, but it worked out for us anyway. The other thing that I wanted to make that I didn't was a sauce, a Parmesan yogurt herb sauce that is in the recipe, which you can make with Greek yogurt or sour cream. The flavor of this chicken would have been amazing with that added in. So if you're going to make this at home, I would definitely make that sauce. I do plan to make it in the future, but it just isn't something that, with everything going on or breaking down, should I say, I wanted to go ahead and do at this point. The whole point of my sheet pan process was so I had time in between the cooking process to keep the kitchen cleaned up and ready to go. Of course, when I ended up throwing things in the air fryer and on the stove, that isn't the way it ended up working out, but the meal itself still turned out beautiful, and that's the most important thing. Sometimes in the kitchen, we just have to improvise. With everything complete, the boys grabbed some chicken thighs and scarfed them down on their way out the door. When they came home, there was still some extra left for them, despite the desires of my tiniest little helper there at the table. When she finished what was on her plate, her sister's plate, and a little bit of what was on my plate, she was still asking for more of her steak. If you're new to sheet pan meals or just looking for some new recipes, I hope you'll find the links down below helpful, and I hope you've enjoyed visiting our kitchen today. Thanks for stopping by the Hometown Homestead, and I hope to see you back really soon.